When you think about the weapon that systematically dismantled Egypt's multi-million-dollar air defense network back in the late 1960s, you probably picture a stealth bomber.
Right, or like a massive coordinated airstrike.
Exactly. Or maybe some, highly trained commando unit executing a midnight raid. But it wasn't any of those things.
No, it really wasn't.
It was actually a 20-something university student. She
Yep.
was just sitting in a cosmopolitan Parisian cafe, sipping coffee and writing love letters.
It just completely upends our entire cultural perception of espionage, doesn't it? I mean, we are so conditioned by Hollywood.
Oh, absolutely. The laser grids and the silenced pistols.
Yeah, the microscopic cameras, all of that. But the reality of intelligence gathering is often far quieter and, well, significantly more devastating.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are pulling you into a narrative that proves the most dangerous vulnerability a nation have isn't a crack in a concrete bunker. It's the human heart.
It really is.
So our mission today is to explore a remarkable historical account from a text known as Shi-Yo-Eye, or in English, the pasted text. We are going to map out the true, astonishing trajectory of Heba Selim.
Right. A woman who fundamentally altered the strategic balance of the entire Middle East.
Yeah, becoming one of his most infamous spies, all without ever firing a single bullet.
It is a masterclass in psychological manipulation. And a really stark look at these shadow wars that, define modern geopolitics.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
But before we step into the streets of Cairo and Paris, I need to establish the ground rules for you, our listener, because we are analyzing a narrative that is deeply entrenched in the Arab-Israeli conflict.
And that is a history layered with profound trauma.
Immense political complexity. Strongly held convictions everywhere you look. So let's be crystal clear here. We are not taking sides.
Exactly.
We're not endorsing any political ideology. We aren't judging the historical geopolitics, and we are not declaring a good guy or a bad guy.
No, not at all.
Our sole objective is just to dissect the events, the human psychology, and the strategic maneuvers exactly as they unfolded in the historical record we are examining today.
And that analytical distance is essential because to truly grasp the magnitude of this story, you really have to mentally transport yourself to the post-World War II Middle East.
Right.
You are looking at a region undergoing these seismic explosive transformations. The old colonial powers are retreating, borders are, highly contested.
And newly independent nations are just rushing to build their identity.
Their identities and their militaries, yeah. In this environment, the intelligence war, the shadow war, is arguably the primary theater of conflict.
Information isn't just power in this era.
No, it is immediate existential survival.
And right in the epicenter of that transformation, you have the foundation of our story. Heba Selim was born in Cairo in the late 1940s.
Yes.
And the environment she grew up in is absolutely critical to understanding how she operated later in life. She was born into this highly respected upper-middle-class family. Her father was a senior government official.
Which means she was insulated from the daily economic struggles that defined the lives of many in the region at that time.
Right, she grew up with financial stability.
She did, yes, but more importantly, she grew up with immense social capital. In a society where who you know often dictates how far you can go, she started at the top of the ladder.
And she is experiencing this life of privilege while the very ground beneath her country is shifting. I mean, she comes of age right alongside the 1952 revolution.
The revolution which overthrew the Egyptian monarchy.
Exactly, and she lives through the massive, sweeping rise of President Gamal Abdel Nasser. The entire cultural atmosphere was just electric with pan-Arab nationalism.
With the promise of a powerful, modern, unified Arab world, imagine the psychological conditioning of that environment for a young person.
Oh, it must have been intense.
You are in a household connected directly to the levers of state power, watching a new national identity being forged in real time. It breeds a very specific type of worldview.
How so?
Well, you learn early on that power is fluid. That influence matters more than official titles. And you become highly attuned to the political currents shaping the world around you.
Okay, let's unpack this, because looking at her psychological profile, it struck me that Heba possessed the exact, precise skill set of a modern-day CEO, or like a top-tier crisis public relations executive.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. She wasn't just smart and highly educated, but she had this intangible gravitational charm. She was fiercely ambitious, undeniably confident, and just extraordinarily persuasive.
The historical accounts universally emphasize that sociability. She was a chameleon in the best sense of the word.
Yeah.
She had the innate ability to read a room, understand what the people in it valued, and immediately project those values back to them.
She made people feel heard.
Heard, understood, and crucially, she made them feel safe enough to trust her.
Think about the people who effortlessly rise to the top of any intense corporate or political environment today. It's rarely the person who's simply the most technically proficient at the job.
Exactly.
It's the person who walks into a crowded room and instantly commands the emotional climate. It's the person who, when they are talking to you, makes you feel like you are the center of the universe.
And Heba had that magnetic pull. Plus, growing up around senior government officials, she watched adults wield power. She learned not to be intimidated by it.
And that lack of intimidation is a critical ingredient, isn't it?
It really is. When you combine natural charisma with an upbringing that demystifies authority, you get an individual who can navigate high-stakes situations with this chilling calmness.
Wow.
She understood the language of the elite, the subtleties of leverage, and the unspoken rules of influence.
So you have this ambitious, fiercely intelligent young woman in Cairo, and her ambition naturally dictates that she needs a larger stage. So in the late 1960s, she makes a decision that acts as the absolute catalyst for the rest of her life.
She leaves Egypt to further her education in Paris.
And we cannot understate the monumental culture shock of that transition. I mean, moving from Cairo to Paris in the late 1960s wasn't just a change in geography.
No, it was a transition between two completely different realities. Paris at that time was a boiling cauldron of radical philosophy.
Student protests.
Yeah, international cosmopolitanism and unrestrained ideological debate.
It was the era of the May 1968 student uprisings in France. The city was flooded with international students challenging every established norm.
Exactly.
But to really grasp what happens to Heba in Paris, we have to talk about the geopolitical earthquake that happened right before she embedded herself in that Parisian culture.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the 1967 Six-Day War.
And the 1967 war is the defining pivot point of this entire era. In a matter of days, the militaries of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan were decisively defeated by Israel.
Right.
For Egypt, it was a profound generation-defining trauma. Their air force was largely destroyed on the ground.
The Sinai Peninsula was occupied.
Yeah, and the prevailing narrative of an invincible rising Arab power under Nasser was just instantly shattered.
The psychological whiplash of that defeat for the Egyptian public is hard to even quantify. Thousands of families were personally grieving, the economy was reeling.
And the nation was collectively bracing for what felt like an inevitable looming continuation of the conflict.
Now, I want you to place Heba Selim in Paris during the direct aftermath of that devastation. In Cairo, she would have been surrounded by a unified, collective grief, a shared determination to rebuild the national honor.
But in Paris...
Right, in Paris, she is suddenly untethered from that collective national consciousness. She's sitting in cafes, attending university lectures, and socializing in a highly diverse international environment.
Where the 1967 war is being analyzed, debated, and dissected from every conceivable angle, including viewpoints highly sympathetic to Israel.
So her social circle dramatically expands, and she begins socializing with individuals who, at first, just seemed like interesting worldly peers. But these seemingly casual friendships were actually the outer tendrils of Israeli intelligence.
Right.
She was being carefully assessed, cultivated, and eventually recruited by the Mossad.
This raises an important question. How exactly does a devastating national defeat alter the internal compass of an ambitious expatriate? Because historians and analysts have debated her true motivations for decades.
Right, like, was she an ideological convert, or was she just a supreme opportunist?
It is likely a complex amalgamation of both. I mean, imagine observing the fallout of the 1967 war from the intellectual distance of a Parisian cafe.
Right, you're removed from the immediate emotional fallout.
Exactly. She is analytical, she respects power, and she just watched her home country suffer a catastrophic military collapse. Some historians argue she made a cold, pragmatic assessment that Israel was simply the stronger, more technologically advanced entity.
And she wanted to align herself with the winning side.
Yes. But others suggest her ambition led her to seek the thrill, the importance, and the financial or social rewards that come with being a high-level intelligence asset.
Wow.
When your foundational worldview is dismantled by a military defeat, the void it leaves behind can be filled by completely new, even contradictory allegiances.
But wait, I have to push back on the mechanics of this because I want you to walk us through how this even happens practically. She's one Egyptian university student in a massive, sprawling European capital filled with tens of thousands of international students.
Yeah.
How does an intelligence agency like Mossad even find her? I mean, they don't just have an ad in the newspaper. How does she pop up on their radar in the first place?
Well, that is the invisible art of the intelligence targeting cycle. Intelligence agencies do not randomly bump into people at cafes and hope for the best.
Okay.
They operate highly systematic, meticulous networks. They identify locations where target demographics congregate, in this case, universities and student unions, in a major European hub.
Right.
They have operatives whose entire job is simply to socialize, to listen, and to map out the human terrain.
So they are essentially networking with a hidden agenda.
Exactly. They look for individuals who fit a very specific matrix. First, they look for placement and access. Does this person have access to valuable information?
And if not, do they know someone who does?
Right. Do they have a close relationship with someone who does? Second, they look for vulnerability or motivation. Is this person strapped for cash? Are they disgruntled with their home government? Are they overly ambitious?
Oh, yeah.
In Heba's case, an operative likely noticed an intelligent, charismatic Egyptian student who was expressing cynical or shifting views about her home country's government following the 1967 defeat. That makes her a person of interest.
Okay, but as you said, she is a university student in Paris. She doesn't have Egyptian military launch codes hidden in her dormitory?
No, she doesn't.
So what is her actual value to Israeli intelligence?
Her value was her Rolodex. She was the bridge. In intelligence terms, a bridge is an asset who may not hold the secrets themselves, but they have the intimate trust and access to the target who does hold the secrets.
Okay. Oh.
And Heba had a lifeline stretching directly back from Paris to the upper echelons of the Egyptian military apparatus.
Which brings us to the actual execution of her espionage, and this is where the story becomes truly staggering. Because she didn't become a master of disguise, she didn't learn how to crack safes or decipher cryptography.
Right.
Her weapon of choice was influence, and the target she set her sights on was an Egyptian army officer named Farouk El-Feki.
A man who, according to the historical accounts, was profoundly, perhaps obsessively in love with her.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because when you look at her methodology, Heba essentially invented the 1960s espionage equivalent of what we now call social engineering in the cybersecurity world.
That is a brilliant framing for what she accomplished. Break down how that parallels her actions.
So if you talk to a modern hacker, they will tell you that trying to brute force your way through a billion-dollar corporate firewall using just code is exhausting. It's expensive, and it usually fails. The technology is just too robust.
Sure.
But hackers know they don't need to break the digital wall. They just need to exploit the human being sitting behind the keyboard. The human firewall is always the weakest link. So instead of writing complex malware, a hacker will send an email posing as the IT department, or manipulate an employee's sense of urgency or fear and simply ask them for their password.
Right, they just trick the person.
Exactly. Heba executed a masterclass in social engineering. She didn't need to infiltrate an Egyptian military base. She didn't need to bypass armed guards. She just needed to systematically manipulate the human being who already had authorized access to the secrets.
She bypassed the entire national security apparatus by walking right through Farouk's heart.
Yep.
And she achieved this through a relentless, meticulously crafted campaign of emotional manipulation.
How did she keep that up from Paris?
The records show she maintained this operation through a steady stream of letters, secret meetings when possible, and intense emotional leverage. She preyed on his isolation, his desire for her, and likely his hopes for a shared future.
Wow.
She created a dynamic where his loyalty to her superseded his oath to his uniform and his country. Slowly, deliberately, she convinced him to cross the ultimate red line, handing over highly classified military intelligence.
And we are not talking about low-level troop gossip or administrative schedules here.
No, not at all.
The intelligence Farouk was passing to Heba, which she then transmitted to Israeli handlers, was catastrophic for Egypt. The list included real-time military deployments, defensive fortification blueprints, early warning radar locations.
And most crucially, the exact pinpoint geographic coordinates of Egypt's newly acquired Soviet-built surface-to-air missile systems, or SAMs.
We really need to pause and emphasize the sheer gravity of that last point.
Yes, we do.
The SAM systems were not just another weapon in the arsenal. They were the absolute linchpin of Egyptian national survival at that moment in history.
They really were. Walk us through why those specific missiles were so vital. Why were they the ultimate prize for Israeli intelligence?
Well, remember the context of the 1967 war. The Egyptian Air Force had been decimated. They had virtually no way to contest the skies using fighter jets. So between 1967 and 1970, the region was embroiled in what is known as the War of Attrition. This was a grueling, localized, but highly lethal conflict. It was characterized by artillery duels across the Suez Canal and deep penetration Israeli airstrikes into Egyptian territory.
And without an air force, Egypt was completely exposed from above.
Completely. To stop Israeli jets from flying over Egyptian territory with impunity, they turned to the Soviet Union, who provided these massive, complex surface-to-air missile networks.
Think of these SAM networks as an invisible, interlocking umbrella of radar and missiles covering the country.
Right.
As long as that umbrella was up, Israeli jets couldn't operate freely without taking heavy, unacceptable losses. The SAMs were Egypt's only shield.
So establishing that shield is a logistical nightmare. I mean, you are moving massive radar dishes, command vehicles, and missile launchers around the desert.
And you're trying to keep them hidden so they can ambush incoming jets.
Precisely. And building a SAM site takes time, it takes concrete, and immense effort. It is a strategic chess game. Egypt is trying to secretly position these missiles to catch the Israeli Air Force off guard.
But because of Farouk and because of Heba, the Israelis didn't have to guess. They weren't flying blind. They were being handed the exact coordinate map of the entire Egyptian air defense umbrella.
Which means they could exploit the shield before it was even fully raised. By compromising those locations, Heba allowed the Israeli military to route their jets through the gaps in the radar coverage.
Or better yet, to launch precision strikes to destroy the SAM sites while they were still being built.
Or right after they were moved. The result was just devastating. Official assessments later concluded that the intelligence funneled through Heba directly enabled accurate, lethal Israeli strikes on Egyptian military targets,
Resulting in significant loss of life and massive setbacks to Egypt's military recovery. To the Mossad, Heba Selim was the holy grail of intelligence assets.
Oh, without a doubt.
She was sitting safely in a cafe in Paris, utterly removed from the combat zone, yet she was directing the destruction of the enemy's most critical infrastructure in real time. She was a ghost orchestrating a symphony of destruction.
But her very success became the seed of her undoing. There is a paradox in intelligence gathering. If you get incredible information and you act on it perfectly every single time, you wave a giant red flag to your enemy that their house is compromised.
It is the ultimate dilemma for an intelligence agency. You possess actionable intelligence that can win a battle today, but using that intelligence reveals its existence.
Which almost guarantees you will lose the source providing it for tomorrow.
Exactly.
And the deadly precision of those Israeli airstrikes is exactly what triggered the alarms in Cairo. I mean, Egyptian counterintelligence officers aren't fools when they secretly move a massive missile battery under the cover of darkness, enforcing strict radio silence.
Right.
And then an Israeli jet bombs it with pinpoint accuracy 6 hours later. They know it wasn't a lucky guess.
That level of repeated precision removes the possibility of coincidence entirely. The counterintelligence units realized immediately that a high-level mole was bleeding their most guarded secrets in real time.
So they initiate a massive, paranoid mole hunt deep within their own ranks. And the mechanics of catching a spy in this era are fascinating. It's not about checking computer logs or cell phone pings.
No, it's about compartmentalization and human tracking.
Right.
It is a process of brutal, methodical elimination. Counterintelligence operates by restricting information flow. They will take a piece of information, say a fake coordinate for a new missile site, and they will only tell a specific group of 5 officers.
This is called a barium meal, right?
Yes, exactly, a barium meal. If that fake coordinate gets bombed, they know the mole is one of those 5 men.
Wow.
Through this agonizing process of tracking who knew what and when they knew it, the net slowly, inevitably tightened.
And that tightening net eventually choked Farouk el-Fiqi. The investigators traced the flow of leaked data directly to him. The human firewall had been identified.
Yes.
But I have to stop here and ask you about the logic of the Israeli intelligence handlers, because this seems like a massive tactical error on their part.
How so?
Well, if you know that bombing these SAM sites with such obvious precision is going to trigger an aggressive mole hunt in Cairo, why do you take the shot? Aren't you actively deciding to sacrifice your best spy?
That's a fair question.
Like, why not hold back, let a few sites go operational just to protect Heba's cover for a bigger future conflict?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to recognize the unique, brutal calculus of the war of attrition.
Okay.
This was not the Cold War. In a Cold War scenario, intelligence agencies will hoard secrets for decades. They're constantly protecting their sources, preparing for a hypothetical World War III that might never happen.
Right, playing the long game.
But the war of attrition was a hot, bleeding, daily conflict.
Soldiers were actively dying on the canal every day.
Exactly. When your nation is actively losing pilots, losing territory, and facing a daily existential threat, the long-term protection of a spy in Paris becomes secondary to the immediate survival of your combat troops.
That makes sense.
Every operational SAM site meant dead Israeli pilots. The intelligence value of Farouk and Heba was only worth the lives it could save on the battlefield that day.
Wow, okay.
It is a ruthless, utilitarian calculation. You burn the intelligence bridge because you have a war to fight right now.
Yeah.
You sacrifice the queen to win the immediate skirmish. That makes a tragic, terrible kind of sense. So, Egyptian counterintelligence closes in. They arrest Farouk. And under interrogation, the full scope of the breach is revealed.
Right.
They uncover his connection to Heba Selim. They finally have a name, and they had stopped the leak.
They amputated the infected limb, but the brain of the operation was entirely out of their reach.
Right, because Heba is still in Paris. And the jurisdictional reality of the late 1960s meant that Egyptian intelligence was staring at a brick wall. They couldn't just send Cairo police to a Parisian apartment building.
No.
They had zero legal authority on French soil.
And initiating a formal legal extradition request would have been a diplomatic catastrophe. Walk us through why. I mean, why not just go to the French government and say, you know, this woman is a spy, hand her over?
Well, because of the intense geopolitical climate of the Cold War and the Arab-Israeli conflict in Europe, a formal extradition would require public hearings, lawyers, and the presentation of evidence.
Right.
It would drag the entire intelligence failure into the global spotlight. Furthermore, there was no guarantee the French judicial system would even comply. France was navigating its own complex relationships with both Israel and the Arab world.
That's true.
And if Heba or her Mossad handlers caught even a whisper of an extradition request, she would vanish into an Israeli safe house long before the French police ever knocked on her door.
So the front door is locked, barred, and heavily guarded. If Egyptian intelligence wants her to face justice, they have to craft an operation that doesn't rely on laws or treaties.
They have to rely on deception.
They have to launch a psychological operation to draw her out of her European sanctuary.
It is a masterstroke of counter-espionage. They realize that a woman who is highly intelligent, hyper-aware of political dynamics, and likely paranoid because her asset just went entirely silent, is not going to fall for a standard ruse.
Right. You cannot send her a letter saying she won a free vacation.
No, you have to use the one lever she cannot fundamentally ignore. You have to use her family.
Wow.
The historical records outline an elaborate deception. Egyptian intelligence officers approached Heba's father, the respected senior government official whose status originally gave her that unshakable confidence.
And again, this is a man who provided her with a privileged life. He is embedded in the Egyptian state apparatus.
We don't know the precise nature of the conversation between the intelligence officers and her father. Was he coerced? Was he appealed to as an Egyptian patriot? Was he kept completely in the dark about her true crimes?
We just don't know.
Regardless of the method, they secured his cooperation, or at least his unwitting participation, to create a compelling, undeniable narrative. Her father was critically ill, and he desperately needed to see her.
So what does this all mean? When you strip away the geopolitical stakes, you are left with this incredibly dark, poetic irony.
Yeah.
Think about the architecture of her entire espionage career. She built her success on weaponizing Farouk's romantic love. She manipulated his emotional attachment to bypass his rational brain.
And now, the Egyptian state is neutralizing her by using the exact same playbook.
Yes. They weaponized her familial love. They used her loyalty to her father to bypass her counter-espionage training.
It is the ultimate mirrored reflection. They defeated the master manipulator by executing a flawless manipulation. But the brilliance of the operation wasn't just the psychological lure, it was the geographical trap.
Right, because if they told her to fly directly to Cairo to see her sick father, all her alarm bells would ring.
Absolutely.
Flying into the capital of the nation she just betrayed is suicide. She might have had security protocols requiring her to check in with handlers before entering a hostile zone.
So they didn't invite her to Cairo. They told her that her father was receiving medical treatment in a third country. They lured her to Libya.
Why Libya? Why is that the perfect middle ground?
You have to look at the regional politics of the era. By 1969, Muammar Gaddafi had taken power in Libya. The Libyan government at that time was fiercely allied with Egypt, heavily promoting pan-Arab unity,
Right.
and was fundamentally hostile to Israel and Western intelligence agencies. For Egyptian operatives, Libya was effectively their own backyard. They could operate there with full state support.
But from Heba's perspective in Paris, Libya might have simply looked like a neutral Arab nation.
Exactly. A plausible place for advanced medical care, and crucially, a place where she wasn't currently wanted for treason. It lowered her guard just enough to get her on a plane.
And the moment the landing gear touches down on Libyan soil, the illusion shatters. The trap snapped shut with terrifying speed. Upon her arrival at the airport, she isn't met by doctors or her family.
No.
Libyan authorities immediately intercept her, arrest her, and hand her directly over to the Egyptian intelligence officers who are waiting on the tarmac.
It is the definition of an extraordinary rendition. They completely bypassed the sovereignty of France, they ignored international extradition treaties, and through the use of an allied nation, they executed a seamless shadow extraction.
She is put on a plane to Cairo, this time in the custody of the very intelligence apparatus she had been evading. And with that flight, the shadow war ends.
It does.
The covert phase of her life, the Parisian cafes, the invisible ink, the secret meetings, is over. She is dragged into the harsh, unforgiving light of the Egyptian legal system.
The transition from the shadows to the public square is abrupt and absolute. Both Heba, Selim, and Farouk El-Feki were placed on trial before a military tribunal in Cairo.
The charges were as severe as they get. High treason, espionage, passing highly classified military secrets to an enemy nation during an active state of armed conflict.
The evidence, heavily supported by the intelligence flow that Farouk had confessed to, was insurmountable. The military court found them both definitively guilty.
And in a military tribunal during a period of national trauma, the consequences for high treason are foregone conclusions.
In 1974, both Heba Selim and Farouk El-Feki were sentenced to death by hanging. The historical record confirms that those sentences were indeed carried out.
It is a brutal, grim conclusion to the physical reality of her life. But the historical text we are analyzing makes it clear that the execution was not the end of her story.
No, not at all.
In many ways, it was just the beginning of her ghost story. Her case became instantly ingrained in the Egyptian national consciousness. It became one of the most famous, heavily scrutinized espionage cases in the history of the modern Middle East.
What's fascinating here is how the actions of one individual, a civilian operating largely out of a European capital, can sear themselves so deeply into the cultural DNA of an entire nation.
She became the ultimate symbol of the enemy within. The source material notes that for the Egyptian public, she represented the absolute pinnacle of betrayal.
Right.
Because she didn't just sell secrets. She sold secrets while the nation was actively bleeding, while families were burying sons lost in the war of attrition.
It forces us to confront a reality that we often try to ignore. It reiterates the critical need to view history through a multifaceted lens. We construct monuments to battles fought with tanks in the desert, but stories like Heba Selim's prove that the trajectory of a war can be entirely derailed in the hidden, invisible realms of psychological manipulation.
And human frailty.
Exactly. The battlefield of the mind is often more decisive than the battlefield of armor.
And because it touches on such raw human emotion, her story has left a massive cultural footprint. Over the last 50 years, her life has inspired countless books, serialized television dramas, and exhaustive documentaries.
She became a cinematic villain, a cautionary tale, and a subject of endless debate.
But even with half a century of journalistic investigation and public fascination, the source text points out a lingering, enduring reality. Parts of this story remain shrouded in absolute mystery.
Because the full operational truth of an intelligence triumph or an intelligence failure is rarely, if ever, declassified for the public.
Exactly. To this day, certain operational details are disputed. The exact nature of her recruitment, the full extent of the intelligence past, the precise psychological levers pulled to capture her.
These are things that live in redacted files.
Yeah, it proves that in the world of espionage, we are only ever allowed to see the shadows dancing on the wall. We see the impact of the weapon, but we rarely get to inspect the weapon itself.
We can read the pasted text, but we may never fully understand the chemistry of the glue that holds it all together.
That is the perfect metaphor. Well, that brings us to the end of our exploration of this incredible narrative. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the history of Heba Selim.
It's been a journey.
We've unpacked how a charismatic, ambitious student managed to neutralize an entire national defense network, proving that human influence will always find a way to bypass the strongest physical fortresses.
It is a sobering lesson in the vulnerabilities of trust and power.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought. A thought that takes this Cold War history and drops it directly into the device you are using right now.
Oh, this is a good one.
Think about how the digital age has fundamentally weaponized the exact same tactics Heba Selim used, but on a global scale. If a modern-day Heba were operating right now, would she even need to travel to a cafe in Paris to make contact with foreign intelligence?
Absolutely not.
In our current era of hyper-realistic deepfakes, of highly sophisticated catfishing operations, and end-to-end encrypted messaging, the human element of espionage is simultaneously infinitely more remote and terrifyingly more intimate.
A spy doesn't need to bump into you at a university mixer anymore.
No, they just need to slowly, methodically manipulate your trust through an avatar on a screen. The human firewall is still the primary target, but the hackers are invisible.
Wow.
It makes you wonder. As we live our entire lives through these digital networks, sharing our locations, our anxieties, and our allegiances online, how secure are the secrets held by the people we think we know best?
It is an unsettling paradigm shift to consider. The battleground is no longer just a cafe in Paris, it is in all of our pockets.
Something to carefully consider the next time a charismatic stranger slides into your direct messages, offering exactly what you want to hear. Thank you for listening. Thank you for diving into the shadows with us. And as always, keep questioning the world around you. We'll see you on the next deep dive.